The rain that night wasn't water, it was glass. Needle fine. Wind-flung. Slicing neon into confetti along the riverwalk. Riven Ashford stood beneath it anyway. A man in a charcoal suit ruined by the weather and a small jade ring cooling in his fist. The ring had a hairline crack that caught the streetlight like a fault line. A green planet split by a pale tectonic scar. His phone lit up with a push alert from FinanceWire. Ashford Tech under probe for SEC violations. A story with no sources. Only the kind of words that make banks twitch and board members turn off their read receipts. He scrolled. It was precise in all the wrong ways. Like someone had copied his pulse and left it on a public notice board. A courier found him under the bridge, hooded against the slant rain, to deliver a cream envelope, calligraphed, lavish. The sender Ilara Vos. Inside. The wedding card gleamed with gilt. Ilara and Magnus request the honor. The date 3 weeks. The venue, the Lennox Conservatory where Riven had once promised her a rooftop orchard and a winter full of peaches. Back then she'd laughed and said she didn't eat fruit. Now she was marrying the man whose firm had shorted Riven's stock 3 times and won. He pressed the cracked ring to his palm so hard it left a circular dent. The ring didn't belong to Ilara. It belonged to a ghost named Isolde in a childhood story. His mother used to read, "A queen who hid a kingdom inside a ring and only spoke when the sea was loud." His mother's voicemail, hours old and chirpy, now sounded like an apology. "Hi, love. If the papers say anything strange, just remember I'm proud of you. And you have clean shirts at the house." The sea was loud. The city was louder. He didn't go home. Across the street, beneath the metal awning of a shuttered noodle shop, a woman watched him watch the rain. She sat with her back to a graffiti angel whose blue wings dripped down the wall. Her cardboard sign said not a sob story, just hungry. Her hair was ropey with damp, but her eyes were glass, reflective, not pleading. When the wind gusted, the sign flipped and showed a cleaner surface. No smudges, no warps. New cardboard. Prepared. She wasn't who she pretended to be. And Riven's instincts, fine-tuned for hostile takeovers, pricked like nettles. The river stank of iron. Somewhere, in the wedding band in a future he didn't own, began a waltz. The jade ring cooled further, the crack shining like a thin smile. Riven crossed the street and the angel's wings brightened behind the woman like a bad omen, photobombing a good suit. "Do you need help?" he asked. "Not the kind you're offering," she said. And the glass rain held its breath. He didn't know it yet. But this was the moment the city twisted the key. Because in 15 days, he would take this woman to his ex-fiancée's wedding. In 16, a prosecutor would step into a ballroom with a warrant and a long memory. And in 17, the ring would stop being a prop and start being the thing that cut. The city looked better wet. That was the lie, he told himself as he stood under the skeletal ribs of the old iron bridge and let the storm pinstripe his suit. Rain made glass honest. It stripped the gloss from facades and reminded steel it was once ore. Buildings, they were once scaffolds. Men, that they were once boys with unfixable hair. The push alert had hit in the elevator by the lobby. Someone from the hedge fund chat had forwarded the link with a knife and fork emoji. By the time he reached the street, the article had spawned 2 think pieces and a meme of his face pasted over a collapsing Jenga tower. He read cold. He always read cold. But it wasn't the words that hurt. It was the precision. Whoever leaked had known the quiet parts. He walked because the car felt like a confession booth. He walked because he wanted the river's stink to scour his head. He walked because his hands remembered the shape of a ring he had not worn in years. The jade disc was smooth as a lie. He'd bought it at an estate sale. Not for the stone, but for the crack. The hairline fracture had felt like an omen and a dare. Everything precious is already broken somewhere you can't see. He kept it in his pocket like a worry coin. A talisman against his own certainty. Under the bridge noodles, old smoke. A sense that something was always burning just out of sight. The noodle shop sign was dark. Letters peeling. Beneath the awning sat a woman in a bomber jacket that had forgotten its color. She watched him with the look of someone who had no time for pity, and yet had catalogued its various flavors the way jewelers catalog flaws. He said, "Do you need help because that was what you said in a civilized city?" Because he had $7 in the inside pocket, and a card that could melt if it wanted to. She tipped her chin toward his fist. "Looks like you're the one squeezing a tourniquet on something." Riven unclenched, surprised by his own hand. The ring left a pale circle. The crack seemed whiter in the wet light. "Are you bleeding?" she asked. "Only money," he said, and hated how it sounded. He tried again. "Do you want food, not noodles?" She said. "All noodles taste like regret when it rains." He barked a laugh he hadn't planned. "That's a strong thesis. It's peer-reviewed," she said, and lifted her cardboard like a toast. The paint marker letters were tidy. Engineers wrote like that. So did mathematicians and women who forged signatures for a living. He stepped closer, and the city's noise softened under the awning. Rain making the good sound shh above tin. "Okay. Not noodles," he said. "There's a bakery on 9th that does a croissant that flakes like a scandal." "Sold," she said. "But I'm not a date. And I'm not a debt you get to call in later. I'm Riven," he said. Because there was nothing to lose from naming a stranger, when the whole internet had just named you a fraud. She tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear with neat, economical fingers. "Yeah," she said. The name fitted her like the jacket fitted her shoulders. Tighter than comfortable. Agile. Secretly expensive. They walked. He matched his pace to hers without thinking. The wind smelled like rivets and hot sugar as they turned up 9th. The bakery had steamed windows and a queue of umbrellas. Riven felt the usual city shift when he crossed a threshold to tilt from anonymous wet animal to paying citizen. He ordered 2 croissants, a black coffee, and atniaznot, water. When the plates arrived, she ate like someone who knew performance was part of survival and refused the part anyway. She did not talk with her mouth full. She did not wolf. She took bites. Deliberate. As if each flake needed a decision. "You ever think about how this city is just one long audition?" she asked. Her eyes on the window where the rain turned the cars into smudged toys. "For what? For safety," she said. "For a voice. For not being the punchline." The table between them smelled of butter and paper. The bakery's fluorescent light made the jade ring look cheap. He turned it, and the crack flashed like lightning in miniature. "That ring," Nia said. "It's got a scar. It was born old." Riven said, "Like some of us. You keep squeezing it," she said. "Like you're trying to break it the rest of the way." "Save it the suspense." He slid the ring into his pocket. "Bad habit. Bad day," she corrected, and sipped water like it was whiskey. He could have told her about the article, and about the way the words under probe could take years of clean audits, and turn them into a rumor no compliance team could wash out. He could have told her about Ilara's envelope, its perfume of lilies and victory. He could have told her about the half voicemail his mother had left where she started to say, "Don't let them," and then remembered she didn't know who they were. Instead he said, "You write your sign in block letters. Cursive looks dishonest," she said. "Block letters say I've thought this through. And the back of your sign's clean," he said. "New stock," she said. "In case someone offers me a different story." She wiped her fingers on a napkin and watched the street again. The rain sound was less shh now and more hiss. "A kettle left on too long. Do you have somewhere to be?" he asked. It came out wrong. He sounded like a manager checking timesheets. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow." He smiled despite himself. "What about tonight?" "Tonight's overrated," she said. Then, softer, "Sometimes you just need it to end." It should have ended there. He should have left her with the rest of the city's damp saints and gone home to draft statements no one would believe. But the ring burned cold against his thigh. And the cream envelope in his jacket felt like a dare taped to a brick. He reached into his pocket. Not for the ring. but for a different card. He laid it on the table face down. The way gamblers do when they're about to disappoint someone. I'm going to ask you something that will make you think I'm either a sociopath or a man hemorrhaging pride. Possibly both. Good pitch. Nia said. Dry. Go on. There's an event, he said. A wedding. The word made his tongue taste like pennies. He stopped. He'd been about to say company, as if he were dialing a car. He was about to say a date. And that was worse. I need a witness. Her eyebrows moved 0.5 millimeter. The only tell. To what? To a story I refuse to let them write for me, he said, and surprised himself with the truth of it. What's it pay? She asked. Businesslike. A clean start, he said. Cash. A safe place for a week. New stock. And the part where you want to stage a scene in front of your ex, she said. It wasn't a question. That's free. He stared at the table. At the butterflakes like gold leaf. At his own hands, which had built and broken things much larger than bread. When he looked up, he felt the old boardroom stillness. When everything depends on whether you blink first. I want her to wonder, he said. I want him to choke on the idea that I am not alone. You're alone in a bakery trying to hire a woman with a cardboard sign, Nia said. Gentle and merciless. Riven didn't trust the ache in his chest. So he went clinical. You'd be safe. You'd be dressed. You'd be briefed. You'd have the right to walk away at any time. You'd get paid whether or not you show up. No one touches you without your consent. You set the boundaries before we even learn each other's last names. Nia considered the rain, which was now a steady soft fury. The sound of 1,000,000 small angers hitting pavement. Then she looked back at him. And the bakery. Its noise. Its clatter. Its flour-dusted hustle. Fell away with the simplest trick of focus. You're not asking for a mannequin, she said. You're asking for a mirror. Maybe I need one, he said. Maybe you need a different story, she said. And the only way to get it is to remember the old one out loud. She tapped the face-down card with a fingernail. Flip it. He did. It wasn't his business card. It was the wedding invitation. Heavy as guilt. Elora, Magnus. The ink curled like Ivy. The Lennox Conservatory was printed in a typeface that believed in legacy. The RSVP date was 2 days ago. Nia traced the embossed border without touching it. People print these to prove they've already won, she said. It's like sending out medals before the race. His throat felt tight. So, will you? Tonight, she said. I'll take a shower without counting seconds. That's the currency you're offering. Isn't it time without alarms? She folded the invitation and slid it back to him. I'll go. Not because I believe in your revenge. Because I'm curious what a man like you does when the script breaks. What's a man like me, he asked. The kind who squeezes cracked rings, she said. And stood. He walked her back to the noodle shop because a gesture is still a gesture even when it's too small. They exchanged numbers. The disposable kind. He caught himself wanting to ask her real last name and swallowed it whole. Like a stone. At the corner. The wind took a deep breath and screamed once around the buildings. Nia zipped her jacket to her throat and looked at him like a scientist. Looks at an experiment that might explode. 2 house rules, she said. 1, don't lie when the truth will do. 2, if I say stop. Stop. Even if the orchestra's about to hit their crescendo. Agreed, he said. And meant it. And 1 for you, she added. Deadpan. If I see noodles at that wedding, I am leaving. He almost smiled. I can work with that. She stepped backward into rain, turned silver under the street lamp. Get some sleep. Ashford, she said. As if she could pronounce his surname into armor. You're going to need it. He watched until the angel wings on the wall had nothing human left beneath them. Then he turned up his collar and walked home through a city that smelled like hot metal and sugar. The jade ring cold in his pocket and the wedding card hot against his ribs. The trick to rain is not to fight it. Let it find you and name you, and keep you from smelling like anything but weather. The trick to men like him is simpler. Don't be impressed by their toys. I ate a croissant like a person who remembers cutlery. I watched his hands because they spoke louder than his mouth, the clench, the turn, the indecision when he offered help. As if charity were a merger he had to model first. I said yes because curiosity is my favorite sin, and because sometimes the world gives you a door with your shape cut out. Under the awning, I tucked my sign back into my pack. New cardboard. Noticeboard. Just hungry. People give more when you don't sound like you're auditioning for pain. Pain is private. Pain is a locked room with the lights off. What I sell is competence. The city likes competence. It thinks it can tax it. He didn't flinch at the rules. That mattered. Men flinch at rules when they think they're the exception. He agreed quickly. Not because he was desperate he was, but because he understood that boundaries make contracts real. Up on third, a bus hissed like a dragon with a bad lung. Somewhere inside me, a small wolf uncurled. It had slept for months. Tonight, it licked rain from its paw and said, "Work." I went back to my place. Not home. The window leaked in a polite, consistent way. The room smelled like plaster, and the citrus wipes the shelter gave out on Tuesdays. I turned on the radio low so the dark had a voice. I took off the bomber jacket, shook it once, set it over the chair like it was a person I liked. From the pocket, I pulled out a different ring. Noticeboard. Steel. Thin. The kind you buy at a hardware store to keep keys together. I spun it on the table. It rattled and fell with a sound like a coin deciding what it wanted to be. The city thundered. A wedding needed a dress. A mirror needed fingerprints. A story needed a cost. I turned the water on and let the shower run until the steam made the mirror blind. I counted. I stopped counting. I washed my hair with the kind of shampoo that works twice as hard when you apologize to it. When I lay down, I did not sleep. I rehearsed. Not the part. The exit. Always know your exits. The city will set the fire and forget to tell you where the doors are. Between one breath and the next. I remembered my father saying, "If you have to walk into a room that can eat you, bring a song it doesn't know the words to." I smiled into the pillow. Alone and not lonely. Tomorrow I would find a song. He didn't sleep. He made coffee that tasted like burnt math and stared at the ring on the counter. Alara's name sat on the invitation like a weight. Magnus's namn satt like a dore. He drafted a press release and, halfway through, deleted the line that said these allegations are baseless because baseless was a lawyer word, and he needed a human one. He called his mother and hung up when the voicemail beeped, because her voice would make him careful, and careful had not saved him yet. At 4, the storm quieted. At 5, the gulls started their industrial shrieking. At 6, the city's collar was up, and its hair was slicked back, and it looked at him like, well, he palmed the jade ring and felt the crack with his thumb. The fracture was cool and thin and faithful. He put it on the chain he didn't wear and hung it round his neck like an apology. By 7, his inbox was a war he refused to join. By 8, his board chair sent a text that said, "Call me before the markets open," with the casual all caps of a man who could evict him from his own name. By 9, he was on the sidewalk again. Collar up. City up. The glass rain downgraded to a mist that made the air sweet with ozone. The river smelled less like iron and more like the promise of late trains. He walked to the bridge. The noodle shop's angel dripped blue. The awning held a memory of heat. Nia was gone. But the space where she had been felt occupied. As if the city had finally decided to hold a shape for him. He checked his phone. One unread message from an unknown number. Nia croissant was ennuyé. Event wardrobe black. Clean lines. No sequins. Boundaries list coming at noon. Also, tell me if the venue has steps or ramps. I don't do stairs in bad shoes for men who owe me money. He laughed out loud in a way that startled a pigeon into theological flight. He typed back. Fingers warming as if messages were a kind of friction. Riven Conservatory. Marble stairs. I'll fix the shoes part. Noon works. And thank you. 3 dots blinked. Stopped. Blinked again. Naya, don't thank me yet. We haven't broken anything. He slipped the phone into his pocket and felt the ring settle against his sternum like a coin paying for air. Somewhere uptown. A florist's hands were making promises out of thorns. Somewhere downtown. A journalist was lining up adjectives like dominoes. Somewhere between the two. A man who had believed for too long in his own weather forecast decided to make a storm instead. The city cleared its throat. Riven lifted his face into the clean, mean morning and thought, let's write this out loud. Morning was a liar. It came gold through the blinds, as if the city had forgiven itself overnight. My room didn't believe in forgiveness. It still smelled of damp plaster and half-burned coffee. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and wrote 3 lists on a torn piece of invoice paper. What I need: shoes that can walk on marble. A dress that can say expensive without meaning it. Silence. What I remember the color of courtrooms. My father's voice saying always shake hands as if you might never see them again. Would I refuse to be a ghost someone hires to haunt another ghost? The radio whispered headlines. Markets down. Another protest. A minister caught lying about charity funds. Ordinary noise. The hum of systemic rot. I opened the window. The street smelled like hot bread and exhaust. The twin saints of survival. Across the way. A man hosed the sidewalk, sweeping away last night's rainbows of oil. You'd never know a storm had happened. The city was good at pretending. So was I. My phone buzzed. Riven Ashford. I let it ring twice before answering. Still alive, his voice was crisp but lighter than last night. Like he'd found an extra lung. Barely. I'm allergic to sincerity before coffee. A pause. Half amusement. Half study. Did you sleep? I rehearsed. For the wedding, for being visible. That might help. He said dryly. I've arranged a fitting. 10 o'clock. The car will. No car? I cut in. I'll meet you there. Text the address. Why? Because if I'm walking into your world, I'm doing it on my own feet. Another pause. He didn't argue. Understood. When he hung up, I stared at my reflection in the window. The glass doubled me, one version tired but upright. Another transparent and waiting for a body. I whispered. You walk straight. Even when it tilts. My father's mantra. Old as debt. Then I packed. He had spent the dawn drafting denials. Rewriting them. And finally deleting them. Every version sounded guilty. The office skyline beyond his penthouse window looked like a row of knives. He dressed like he was going to war. Dark navy. No tea. The suit that said I still own the room. Even if it's burning. The call with the board had been short. They wanted calm statements and a mutual agreement with regulators. He wanted blood. But blood didn't photograph well. At Nuatsinchizechi. His phone chimed. Nia's message outside the fitting place. Don't keep me waiting. The mannequins are starting to pity me. He almost smiled. The boutique stood in a quiet corner of Midtown. All glass and muted jazz. Inside. Chrome racks shimmered under soft lights. And mannequins posed like disinterested witnesses. Nia stood among them. Hair tied back. Bomber jacket replaced by a thrifted gray coat that fit too well to be accidental. Her eyes scanned the room the way auditors scan numbers. You clean up terrifyingly fast. He said. You pay on time. I move on time. She replied. The tailor. A wiry man with glasses that magnified his disapproval, circled her like a hawk measuring prey. We'll need to adjust the shoulders. Himuta. Nia caught Riven's gaze in the mirror. Do I get to choose? Or am I your reflection tonight? You get to choose. He said. But I get to wonder. She smirked. That's healthy. Wonder keeps men from turning into headlines. The tailor fetched a series of dresses. Silk. Satin. Things that whispered class anxiety. She rejected 3 without comment. The fourth, a black dress with subtle pleats and no glitter. She considered in silence. Riven watched her step into the changing room. He shouldn't have looked at the closed curtain. But curiosity was a reflex. Guilt came half a second later. When she emerged, the world lost 1 degree of temperature. The dress fit like an argument. Elegant. Restrained. Impossible to ignore. She didn't ask how she looked, she knew. The tailor nodded approval. She'll steal the room. That's the idea. Riven said. Nia turned sharply toward him. No. You said witness? Not weapon. The correction stung. Mostly because it was true. He nodded once. Witness. Then, they left together. Outside. The wind had teeth again. Cars hissed past. Spraying puddles shaped like continents. Your world's cold. Nia said. Pulling her coat tighter. You get used to it. You shouldn't. They walked without speaking until the silence thickened into something almost companionable. Then Nia said. You didn't ask what I did before the sidewalk. I assumed you'd tell me when it mattered. It might. She said. Someday. He wanted to ask when someday was, but her tone said the conversation was a locked drawer. At the corner, a street violinist played Clair de Lune with cracked fingers. The melody trembled but refused to die. Riven felt something twist under his ribs. Nostalgia. Or maybe the shape of a conscience remembering its job. Nia dropped a bill into the violin case. He's out of tune. She murmured. He knows. Riven said. So do we. She replied. Later that night, Riven sat in his apartment, surrounded by silence expensive enough to echo. The invitation lay on the table like a loaded question. The ring glinted under lamplight. Its crack now a silver vein. He opened a folder. Financial reports. Court filings. The kind of paper that could ruin or resurrect. His private investigator had sent a note that morning, tracing source of leak. All trails point to a familiar hand. He didn't need to read the next line to know the name. Magnus Valle. Elara's fiancé. He leaned back. Exhaled. So it's a war of mirrors. His phone buzzed Nia. Boundaries list attached. He opened it. No touching without permission. No lies about who I am. Even if it helps your story, if you use me to humiliate her, we're done. I walk away when I choose. I don't dance unless I want to. At the bottom, a line in smaller text, Rule 6. If I start asking questions you don't like, answer anyway. He stared at the message until his reflection blurred in the glass. He typed back. Understood. See you tomorrow. Sedem, P.M. 3 dots blinked. Then vanished. Outside. The city rearranged its lights like a chessboard resetting for a rematch. The rain started again. Soft. Deliberate. Almost forgiving. Riven slipped the cracked jade ring onto his finger. The fracture caught the lightning. Bright and thin as truth. Tomorrow. He would walk into the conservatory full of people who wanted his silence. Tomorrow. He would bring a stranger who refused to be quiet. And somewhere between the two, he might find the story he'd been pretending not to need. The Lennox Conservatory rose out of the fog like a memory that refused to stay buried. Glass domes shimmered in the evening light, their panes still wet from the day's rain, catching every reflection of cars, chandeliers, and the ghosts of promises he hadn't yet buried. Through the tinted window of the town car, Riven watched guests step from limousines and glinting sedans, men lacquered in arrogance, women sculpted in confidence. The air itself seemed perfumed with money and quiet cruelty. He didn't belong here anymore. That was the irony. He had built half this city. But tonight, it belonged to someone else. Elada Vos. The woman who had once sworn she'd rather die than become anyone's ornament. Now she was walking down an aisle of glass and roses toward the man who'd sold Riven's company to the wolves. He adjusted his cufflinks. They clicked against his wrist like tiny handcuffs. Beside him, Nia watched the building with detached precision. Her black dress looked simple until the light found it. Then it burned like ink turning gold. Her hair was pulled back clean, revealing the scar near her temple that no makeup could hide. "You look like you're heading to a funeral," she said. "I might be." "Whose?" He almost said mine. Instead, "Depends who dies first." She smiled faintly. "Romantic." He exhaled. "You sure about this?" I said I'd go. I didn't say I'd flinch. The car door opened. Music spilled out. Violins. Laughter. The sound of wealth rehearsing its happiness. Riven stepped out first. The rain cooling instantly against his neck. Cameras flashed. The crowd pivoted. Then she emerged. For one long second, the world slowed. Nia took his arm like she'd been born knowing how to do it. Chin tilted just enough to command curiosity. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she? Is she back? That's not Alara." Perfect. They walked the red carpet of the conservatory stairs under the marble archway. A cathedral of vanity and light. The chandeliers above them shimmered like suspended lightning. Inside, the space felt unreal. Tropical greenery caged in glass. Candlelight flickering against mirrored walls. A string quartet played something expensive and forgettable. Riven's chest tightened. Every step brought back the night he'd proposed here. 4 years ago. Before the betrayal. Before the leak. Before the smile Alara wore when she said it's just business. "Love. Stop clenching your jaw." Nia whispered. "You'll chip a tooth?" He forced a breath. Unclenched. "Sorry." Reflex. "Don't apologize. Just remember why you're here. To prove I'm not broken. To prove you're alive." She corrected. They reached the main hall. Glass panels framed the garden beyond. Rain sliding down them like tears that refused to fall. Waiters moved in slow choreography, offering champagne. Alara stood near the center, radiant in a white gown threaded with silver. The moment she saw Riven, her smile faltered. Just a fraction, but enough to feed the fire in his chest. Magnus Valle. Tall. Angular. Predatory in a velvet tux. Turned and froze for a beat. Then, as if someone had hit resume, Ilara's composure returned. She approached. Every heel click deliberate. "Riven." Her voice was silk stretched over glass. What a surprise. Was it her eyes flicked to Nia? Appraising. Calculating. "You brought company. This is Nia," he said. "A friend." Nia extended a hand. Expression polite but unreadable. "Congratulations." "Ems. Vos." Ilara hesitated a split second too long before shaking it. "Thank you. You look familiar." "Do I?" Nia asked lightly. "Maybe from somewhere you'd rather forget." Riven nearly choked on his drink. Ilara's smile tightened. "Well, we all have those, don't we?" Magnus stepped forward, offering a handshake like a contract. "Good to see you." "Ashford. Didn't expect you'd show up." "I wasn't sure I would," Riven said, matching his grip. "But some invitations are too tempting to ignore." Magnus's grin didn't reach his eyes. Still the dramatic type, only when it matters. The quartet swelled, signaling the start of the first toast. Guests turned. Alara excused herself with a gracious nod. Magnus lingered just long enough to whisper, "Enjoy the show. It's the last one you'll be invited to." Riven's reply was quiet. "We'll see who closes the curtain." When they left, Nia leaned close. "He knows something." "They both do," Riven said. "That's why we're here." "You mean for revenge?" "No," he said. "For proof." From the balcony, the conservatory looked like a snow globe made of secrets. Below, Champagneflutes klinked. Laughter curved through the air. And somewhere behind the polite music, money changed hands without sound. Riven's world was sharp, glittering, and merciless. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at home, but not safe. The woman, Ilara, watched him the way predators watch wounded prey. I recognized the look. I'd worn it once. And Magnus Valle, the fiancé, didn't smile like a man in love. He smiled like a man who had won something and planned to break it to pieces just to prove he could. The string quartet shifted to a waltz. Riven offered his hand. For the optics, he said. He let him. The music folded around us. Too slow to be innocent, his hand was steady but tense. His heartbeat hammering through the fabric of his sleeve. Relax. I murmured. You look like you're about to audit the orchestra. He almost laughed. They're out of tune. No. I said. Meeting his eyes. You are. That stopped him. For a moment, the facade cracked. And there it was. The truth beneath the armor: exhaustion, guilt, something dangerously close to grief. Then he smiled again. Perfect and cold. Maybe I need a better conductor. Maybe you need to stop playing someone else's song. We turned. In the world a blur of glass and gold, I caught Ilara's gaze from across the floor. Sharp. Assessing. And yes. Afraid. Good. Fear meant the story wasn't finished. But as I turned back, something else caught my eye. A man in a dark suit near the bar. He wasn't drinking. Wasn't smiling. He was watching me. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered. His pupils dilated just enough. Then he looked away and pulled out his phone. I leaned closer to Riven. We have a problem. What kind? The kind with a badge or a gun? Maybe both. He didn't miss a step. Are you sure? Positive? He's not here for the champagne. Riven's hand tightened slightly on mine. Then the game started earlier than I thought. Game. He met my eyes. Voice low. Magnus leaked something to destroy me. Maybe tonight. He's testing the explosion. And if it blows, then we make sure he burns too. The music ended. Applause rippled through the room. Riven released me slowly. Careful to make it look casual. The man at the bar disappeared into the crowd. Follow him, I asked. No. Let him think we haven't noticed. Why? Because the best way to win a rigged game, he said, eyes narrowing, is to pretend you're still reading the rules. And for the first time, I believed him. The waltz dissolved into chatter, laughter, the nervous tinkling of crystal. I drifted through the crowd like smoke, weaving between sequined gowns and tailored hunger. The man from the bar was gone. But the residue of his stare clung to me, a static under my skin. People were watching now. Not just at us. At me. They whispered. Took pictures. Speculated. She looks familiar. One voice murmured. From the papers. Maybe. Another replied. No. The papers don't feature ghosts. Ghost. That word hit harder than it should have. I reached for a flute of champagne from a passing tray, mostly to steady my hand. My reflection winked at me in the golden liquid. A woman out of place. Wrapped in silk she didn't own. Standing in a garden built for people who never touch dirt. Riven appeared beside me. You okay? Define okay. Not about to faint. Start a scene? Or stab anyone with a dessert fork? I snorted. 2 out of 3. He smiled faintly. The one you're missing, I don't faint. Good. His tone softened. You saw him again? No. But he'll circle back. Let him. I turned to face him fully. You're too calm. Calming, he said, is just panic with better manners. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the dinner. Waiters glided between tables like ghosts rehearsed in servitude. The sound of knives on porcelain became the new orchestra. We found our assigned seats. Table 12. Strategically placed near the aisle where every guest could see us. Of course, Ilara wanted him close enough to hurt. Riven sotto me left. Across the table sat 2 venture capitalists. A lifestyle influencer. And a woman whose diamonds had their own gravitational pull. So, said the influencer brightly, you're the infamous Mr. Ashford. And this must be, her voice trailed off. Fishing for my name. Nya. I said before Riven could. Just Nia. Lovely. Are you in tech too? Not anymore? I said, smiling politely. Her fork froze mid-air. Oh, what field correctional? I said, mostly human error. The woman blinked, then laughed too loudly. You're funny. Sometimes. Riven hid a smirk behind his glass. Play nice. He murmured. I am. I said, that's the scary part. Dinner progressed like a chess match disguised as a meal. Each toast felt like a declaration of ownership. Who funded whom? Who forgave whom? Who was winning? Halfway through, I felt the hair on my neck rise. The man from before had returned, standing near the exit. Phone still in hen. Eyes darting between me and the head table where Magnus Vale whispered something into Ilara's ear. Ilara laughed too late. Too sharp. Riven. I murmured. Left exit? He's signaling. Riven didn't look up. Describe him. Dark suit. Blue tee. Hair, military short. He's pretending to check his messages, but the camera's pointed here. Riven's jaw tensed. That's not paparazzi. No. I leaned closer, pretending to brush something from his lapel. That's an operative. His eyes flicked toward Ilara. Magnus must have planted him to do what, either document or detonate. Detonate what he hesitated. A story. Isatbak. Then let's give them one worth filming. He didn't trust the way Ilara's laughter carried. It had rhythm. Inton. Magnus leaned close, whispering again, his expression knife-sharp. Across the table, Nia looked utterly composed, sipping her champagne as if she were tasting strategy. He admired that, and feared it. He knew how people broke. He'd seen it in courtrooms, in back rooms, in mirrors. But she didn't crack, she absorbed. Every glare, every whisper. It rolled off her like the rain on the conservatory glass. Then Ilara rose for her toast. Tonight, she began, her voice like a soft bell, isn't only about love, it's about rebuilding trust, learning from the past, and stepping into a future where integrity matters. Riven almost laughed. Integrity. She'd weaponized the word. Ilara's gaze swept the hall and found him. Her smile sharpened. And I'm especially glad, she continued, that some of our guests could join us tonight. Even those whose decisions once challenged our faith in that integrity. A polite ripple of amusement. All eyes turned to Riven. He lifted his glass, smiling like it didn't cut. Always happy to be an educational example. Laughter. Uneasy. Eager. Nia touched his arm under the table. Light but grounding. Don't let her bait you. He leaned closer. I'm not biting. I'm rewriting. When Ilara finished her toast, Magnus took over. More charming. Less venomous. But his words were knives wrapped in compliments. Then, just as the applause began, a phone vibrated on Riven's wrist. A message flashed from his investigator. Found something. Urgent. Private. Attached was a photo. Grainy. Time-stamped an hour ago. It showed the same operative from the bar entering the private east wing of the conservatory with a USB drive. Riven's blood chilled. That wing wasn't open to guests. It connected to the venue's security system. Someone was planting evidence. He rose casually. Excuse me, he said. Nia followed without a word. The east wing. The corridor was empty, lit only by blue safety lamps. Their footsteps echoed too loudly. Security, Nia asked. Offline if he's doing his job. Riven replied. Magnus wants a scandal on record. Photos. Forged files. Something to finish me off. Nia's eyes scanned the shadows. Then we find him before he finishes uploading. At the end of the corridor, a door stood ajar. Light spilled through. They moved silently. Inside, a man in a blue tie was crouched beside a terminal, a flash drive blinking red. Nia stepped forward before Riven could react. Her tone was cool. Board. Funny place for a data transfer. You planning to RSVP to the FBI? The man froze. His hand went to his jacket. Don't. Riven warned. Stay back. The man snapped. This isn't your concern. Wrong. Nia said. You're standing in my reflection. He blinked. What? She moved fast, grabbing his wrist, twisting it just enough to make him drop the drive without breaking anything. The sound of metal on marble echoed like a gunshot. Riven scooped it up, pocketed it. The man gritted his teeth. You have no idea who you're protecting. Riven's voice was ice. Try me. She's not who she says she is. He spat, glaring at Nia. You think you're using her, she's using you. Riven looked at Nia. Her face was unreadable. Finish your upload, she said coldly. And I'll show you what I really am. He hesitated, then bolted for the door. Nia didn't chase him. Neither did Riven. Silence filled the room, thick as static. You want to tell me what that was about? He asked quietly. She met his gaze without blinking. Later. Later might be too late. Then you'll just have to trust me now. He stared at her, the red flash of the USB blinking like a heartbeat in his pocket. Outside. Thunder cracked again. Louder this time. Closer. Riven exhaled slowly. All right, he said. But if you're lying, I don't lie. Nia said, I edit. And when she walked past him toward the hall, he realized she hadn't just saved him from a trap. She'd built a new one, for someone else. They returned to the ballroom just as the final toast faded into applause. No one noticed the faint adrenaline still shaking through his veins, the metallic scent of tension clinging to his suit. To the guests, they were only a striking couple stepping back into the light. Nia had already switched masks, her expression serene, posture perfect, voice soft when she whispered, Smile. They're watching. He obeyed. He had learned long ago that a man could survive anything if he remembered to smile. The string quartet eased into a slower piece. Waiters carried trays of chocolate truffles and lies. Ilara's laughter, brittle and rehearsed, floated above the room again. Riven's hand brushed the USB drive in his pocket. He could feel it pulsing like guilt. What's on it? A planted confession. A fake transaction linking him to fraud. Magnus had always preferred destruction through precision. And then there was Nia. She hadn't flinched back there. Hadn't even blinked when the man accused her of something. She's not who she says she is. The words refused to leave his skull. He glanced at her. She was talking to an elderly investor now. Smile polite but sharp enough to draw blood. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked toward him. Measuring. Checking. As if she could hear the gears grinding behind his calm. When the dessert ended, Magnus stood to make his final toast. Before we begin the dance, he said, I'd like to share a short announcement. Nia's gaze found Riven's instantly. He didn't breathe. Magnus continued. Business, unfortunately, follows us even into love. Tonight, I want to thank my fiancée for her support as my firm finalizes its acquisition of... He smiled directly at Riven. Ashford Technologies. The deal, of course, comes amid challenging circumstances. Gasps. Whispered speculation. The cameras turned. Riven kept his posture. Is that so? Magnus nodded. Oozing sincerity. We'll do everything to restore confidence in the brand. Transparency. Accountability. Things our predecessors sometimes neglected. Ilara looked at her glass, hiding a smirk. Nia leaned in, murmuring, You said you wanted proof. There it is. They're not just marrying each other. They're merging. He didn't answer. His pulse thundered in his ears. Every word Magnus spoke was a carefully rehearsed execution. Of course. Magnus added. We wouldn't want to make accusations, but in times like these, one must ask, how well do we really know the people we trust? The air in the conservatory thickened. Every face turned toward Riven. Every lens found him. He rose slowly, glass in hand. You're right, he said. We never really do. The crowd held its breath. Then he smiled. Not with charm, but with something sharper. But the thing about trust, Magnus, is that it's a currency, and unlike your investments, I don't spend mine on debt. A ripple of laughter. Polite. Uneasy. Magnus's smile froze for half a heartbeat. Always the showman, he said lightly. Tell me. Riven. Still carrying that cracked ring, I remember Ilara telling me you kept it as a reminder of failure. Riven's jaw clenched. Nia's fingers brushed his sleeve. A silent don't. He forced a chuckle. Failure's a better teacher than you'll ever be. The orchestra resumed before Magnus could respond. Conversation scattered like birds after a gunshot. Riven sought. His hand trembled once. Barely. He's baiting me. He muta. Then don't bite. Nia said. He turned toward her. You don't get it. He's building a narrative. That I'm unstable. Paranoid. That the leak was my doing. If he leaks this footage, I look like the villain at their wedding. Nia sippte champagne? Then maybe you need a new ending. The music throbbed like a vein under glass. The guests danced. Laughed. Forgot. They always forgot. I didn't. The man who had tried to upload the fake evidence was gone. But the echo of his words lingered. You think you're using her, she's using you? He was half right. I was using Riven, but not to destroy him. To reach the ones who had destroyed me first. Magnus, Vale, Ilara Voss. The names that had once been on my father's indictment papers. The names that vanished from every record when the case collapsed. I'd spent years hiding in alleys. Rebuilding piece by piece what they erased. Now I was standing 10 feet away from them. And they didn't even recognize me. Riven leaned close. We're leaving soon, he said. Not yet. Nya. Trust me. 5 more minutes. He hesitated. Then nodded once. I moved toward the exit. Heels quiet on the marble. The east wing corridor glowed faintly in the distance. The place where the truth had almost been rewritten. I slipped the small earpiece into my ear and tapped the tiny microphone sewn inside my dress. Are you ready? A voice whispered on the line. Always. I said. Recordings live. Everything we capture tonight goes straight to the encrypted server. Good. I murmured. Time to return the favor. I stepped back into the ballroom. The cameras were still rolling for the wedding livestream. Magnus's vanity insisted on broadcasting every second. I raised my glass toward the bride and groom. Dohonestu, I said, loudly enough for the mic to catch. The nearest guests turned. Ilara froze mid-laugh. Magnus glanced over. Irritated. Forgive me. I continued. I couldn't help overhearing earlier. The bit about integrity and transparency. Such noble words. Ilara's smile tightened. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Oh. I think you've met my family before, I said softly. The crowd murmured. Riven's eyes widened. Yeah. I ignored him. You remember Richard Delane? Don't you, construction tycoon? Partner. Scapegoat. You framed him for embezzlement. And when he died, you buried the proof. Gasps rippled. Magnus's face drained of color. Who the hell are you? I smiled. Every syllable cutting clean. His daughter. The silence was so thick it could have cracked the chandeliers. Riven stood slowly. The realization dawning behind his eyes. He didn't speak. Ilara's voice came out brittle. This is absurd. Is it? I turned slightly toward the livestream camera. Because I have something that says otherwise. I held up the small USB drive. Funny thing about digital ghosts? They never stay buried. Magnus lunged forward. Security. Already called. I said. Along with the Financial Crimes Division, they're watching this broadcast. 2. The doors burst open. 2 men in plain suits entered. Badges flashing silver under the chandeliers. Ilara Voss. Magnus Valle. One announced, "You're under investigation for securities fraud, tax evasion, and falsifying evidence. You'll come with us." The ballroom erupted. Gasps. Phones. Chaos. Ilara's eyes locked on mine. Venom and disbelief swirling together. "You set this up?" "Yes," I said simply. "I edited the truth back to where it belonged." She hissed. "This isn't over." I leaned close enough for only her to hear. "For you." "It is." When the officers led them away, flashbulbs burst like lightning. He should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, he felt disoriented. The woman beside him, this stranger who had stepped out of rain and hunger, had just detonated his entire world, and yet somehow saved him in the same motion. As the guests scattered and the music died, he turned to her. "You used me," he said quietly. "I told you I might, and you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You didn't trust me enough to hear it." For a long second, they just stared at each other. Two liars standing in the wreckage of someone else's fairy tale. Outside, the thunder finally broke open the sky. Nia glanced toward the flashing lights of police cars reflecting off the glass dome. "You wanted proof," she said. "Now you have it." He nodded slowly, and now she gave a tired half-smile. "Now I disappear again. Nya. Don't." Her voice softened, almost kind. "If you follow me, you'll lose what's left of your name, but you'll find me when the truth finishes burning." Then she turned and walked into the storm, rain swallowing her silhouette before he could answer. Riven stood there, the USB still in his hand, the cracked jade ring cold against his palm. And for the first time, he realized both were symbols of the same thing. Everything precious comes broken first. By the time the last siren faded beyond the glass dome, the conservatory looked like an emptied stage after a play that had gone wrong. Chairs overturned, champagne puddles dulling the marble, confetti melting in the rain that slipped through the cracked ceiling. He stood where Nia had left him, at the edge of the chaos, half in light, half in reflection. The police car's strobe lights pulsed through the glass walls, painting him alternately as culprit and survivor. He hadn't moved since she disappeared into the storm. The USB drive lay in his palm, slick with rain, the cracked jade ring pressed against it, cold and unblinking. Together they looked like two halves of a truth no one wanted to touch. He thought of what she'd said, "You'll find me when the truth finishes burning." He wasn't sure if that meant she'd survive the flames or vanish with them. Behind him, a detective cleared his throat. "Mr. Ashford, we'll need your statement." He pocketed the ring and turned. "You'll get it," he said. "But not tonight. Sir. It's better if." He cut him off. "You want the story?" "Right, so do I. I'll tell mine when I've read all the others." And with that, he walked out into the storm. The city swallowed me whole again, as it always did. The rain turned every reflection into an alibi. I moved fast, through side streets and alleyways where the neon hummed like guilt, past puddles that caught fragments of sirens. My heels were ruined, but they'd done their job. So had I. For the first time in years, I felt something close to quiet, not peace. Peace was a myth for people who could still afford trust. This was simpler. Silence, the kind that follows justice when it finally stops screaming. I ducked into a 2-4-hour diner near the harbor. A broken jukebox played static pretending to be jazz. The waitress didn't ask questions. She just poured coffee and left the pot. I took off the earpiece, set it beside the cup, and opened the small burner phone. Messages poured in. Headlines. Footage. Confirmation: Elara Voss and Magnus Valle arrested in livestream scandal. Ashford Technologies, shares surge after false allegations debunked. And then, buried in the flood, a message from an encrypted contact. "You did it. He's cleared. Your father's name too. They can't touch it now." I read it twice, then deleted it. Justice wasn't supposed to feel this empty. The next morning came cruelly bright, as if the sky wanted to pretend nothing had happened. The boardroom smelled of espresso and disbelief. Half the directors had already seen the news, the rest were pretending they hadn't. The air was thick with polite panic. Riven entered without a tie. The gesture was deliberate. Let them see I don't need the uniform anymore. Mr. Ashford, began the chairman. This revelation about Vale and about the false accusations puts us in a unique position. Unique, Riven repeated flatly, meaning profitable, meaning vindicated. Another corrected. Public sympathy is on our side. If you issue a statement today, we can turn this into a redemption arc. Riven smiled thinly. Redemption is for people who want to go back. I'm not going back. He left before they could clap. Outside. His assistant caught up. Sit. The USB? The files Nia gave you. They're genuine. They contain ledgers, emails, recordings. You could have sold it to any media house. I'm not selling anything. Then what will you do with it? He looked out the window. The skyline glittered like a mirage built on deceit. Burn it, he said. All of it. Sir, he turned to her. If I keep it, I become them. She hesitated. And the woman, Nya. Where is she? He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. By the fourth day, my photo was everywhere. Grainy stills from the live stream. Tabloids calling me the shadow bride. The ghost witness. The hacker Harris. They all wanted a quote. They all wanted a villain or a savior. I was neither. I found a small motel 2 hours outside the city. Paid cash. The room had one window and a view of a freeway that never slept. I liked that. Noise meant I could exist quietly. On the table lay the last piece of my father's life. A letter he'd written the week before he died. Folded so many times the paper had softened into cloth. If they ever take everything from you, build something new instead of chasing the ashes. I traced the words until they blurred. I built it. Dad, I whispered. Just not what you'd expect. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. Riven. I found your father's file. I read it. I think you deserve to see what he was working on. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, some ghosts should rest. 3 dots appeared. Then let's make sure they do. I closed the phone. Outside. Trucks thundered past like restless giants. For the first time since the conservatory, I felt something unfamiliar creeping in. A pull. Not toward revenge. Not toward flight. Toward completion. Maybe. I thought. The fire wasn't done yet. That evening. He stood on the pier with the city glowing behind him. The rain had returned. Gentler this time. He tossed the USB drive into the river. It vanished with barely a ripple. The jade ring. Though. He hesitated. The crack caught the last trace of sunset. A thin vein of light. He slipped it back onto his finger. Some scars were worth keeping. His phone vibrated once. One new message. Nia, meet me where the story started. Midnight. He stared at the words until they blurred in the rain. Then he turned toward the bridge where glass once fell like rain. And started walking. The storm was quieter now. But it still remembered their names. Midnight came dressed in fog. The bridge loomed ahead. The same place where everything had started. The same rain-polished steel. The same whispering wind through the girders. The same faint glow of the noodle shop sign across the street. He stood under it. Hollara. Waiting. The city sounded half asleep. Occasional sirens. The low hum of late trains. The shuffle of lives trying to be forgotten. The jade ring was colder than before. It felt heavier too. As if it had absorbed everything that had happened. The accusations. The exposure. The betrayal. The redemption he didn't ask for. And then she appeared. Nia stepped out of the mist like a memory that refused to fade. The same coat. Darker, now with rain. The same quiet defiance in her posture. But something had changed. Her eyes. They weren't sharp tonight. They were tired. Like someone who'd finally outlived the storm she created. "You came?" he said. "I told you I would." He tried to smile. "The city doesn't forgive that easily. You're everywhere. Front page. Interviews. Online myths. Half the people call you a hero. Half a criminal." She shrugged. "They can both be right." They stood in silence. The kind that hummed with too many words unspoken. "I burned the files," he said finally. "All of them. I know. You knew I would. I hoped you would." Riven looked at her. Rain dripping from his hair. "You could have used them. Sold them. Stayed powerful." "Power," she said quietly, "is just a different kind of prison. You learn that when you've already lost everything once." She stepped closer. Her voice lower. "My father wanted me to build something new, not an empire. A clean slate. And did you?" "I'm trying." He exhaled, breath fogging in the cold. "And me? What about you?" "I don't know what I'm supposed to build now." Nia studied him. "Then don't build. Heal. The city already has enough architects of damage." A pause. The sound of rain against the river filled it. Riven's throat tightened. "When you disappeared that night, I thought maybe you were gone for good." "I was," she said softly. "The version of me you met died at that wedding." "Then who are you now?" "Someone new," she said. "Someone free enough to decide what comes next." He took a step closer. Close enough to feel the warmth of her through the rain. "And what comes next?" She looked past him, toward the city skyline. Those towers of light and deceit still shimmering in the mist. "Truth doesn't end with an arrest. There's more out there. Names. Papers. Systems built to erase people like my father. Like me." He nodded slowly. "And you want to find them?" She smiled faintly. "You read fast. Then let me help." "No," she said immediately. "You've done enough." He took another step, his voice almost pleading. "You pulled me out of the wreckage. Nia, don't walk back into another one alone." Her eyes flicked to the jade ring on his hand. "You kept it. Some things you don't throw away." She reached out, fingertips brushing the ring. "And some things you only keep so you remember not to repeat them." He didn't move, didn't breathe. The air between them felt electric. Too many truths colliding in too little space. Then she dropped her hand and turned toward the street. "You'll read about me again," she said. "But not here." "Nya." She looked back once. Her smile faint but real this time. "Call me when you stop wanting revenge and start wanting purpose." And then she was gone again. Swallowed by fog and the hiss of wet tires, the city shrank behind me as the bus rolled out toward the coast. I didn't look back. People who survive what I did learn that closure is just another word for distance. Through the rain-streaked window, the skyline shimmered like a mirage. A kingdom of glass where power was always someone else's reflection. I'd walked through it, set it on fire, and walked away before the smoke could spell my name. The driver turned on the radio. A reporter's voice leaked through the static. Authorities continue their investigation into the financial network connected to the Vale Voss firm. Sources suggest the evidence originated from an anonymous informant known only as the Witness. I smiled faintly. I liked that name better than the Ghost Bride. Outside, the sea appeared. A vast, dark expanse swallowing the last lights of the city. I rested my forehead against the glass. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "They can't erase us if we rewrite the story first." The bus hummed forward into the dark, and somewhere behind me, in a city still learning how to breathe without lies, a man stood on a bridge holding a cracked ring and waiting. Not for vengeance anymore, but for the next chapter neither of us had written yet. 3 weeks passed before the city stopped whispering his name. By then, the rain had turned into frost, the river into glass, and his penthouse into a museum of ghosts. He had returned to work. But the boardroom now felt like an echo chamber. Every meeting, Every handshake was a pantomime of recovery. His company had survived. The media called him vindicated. But victory felt like a disease that wouldn't leave his bloodstream. Every night, he found himself on that same balcony, watching the skyline that once defined him. Somewhere beyond it, Nia had vanished. He didn't try to trace her, not because he couldn't, because he wasn't sure what he'd do if he succeeded. The cracked jade ring still circled his finger like a question mark. He told himself it was just a symbol, a keepsake of closure, but it burned against his skin like unfinished business. Tonight, though, something was different. His phone buzzed once. An encrypted message. No cena. No subject. Do you still want the truth? Meet me at Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone. He hesitated. It could have been anyone. A trap. A lure. A ghost. But Riven Ashford was not the man who ignored ghosts anymore. The wind by the pier bit harder than she remembered. Salt clung to her lips. And the fog rolled in thick enough to blur the line between sea and sky. She'd been staying in a quiet town down the coast, working under another name, tracing the data trail Vale and Voss left behind. The network ran deeper than either of them had known. A lattice of shell corporations feeding a single offshore account. Someone was still moving the money, and whoever it was, they'd noticed her looking. The anonymous message she sent to Riven wasn't just a call for help. It was bait. She needed him angry enough to show up, but smart enough to survive what was coming. She leaned against the rusted railing, hood up, eyes scanning the mist. The city glimmered faintly across the bay, distant and unreal. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Always the dramatic timing. She murmured without turning. Riven stopped a few feet behind her. You called. He came. She exhaled, the fog catching her breath. You shouldn't have. You knew I would. Exactly why I shouldn't have. He moved closer. You said there was truth left. There is, but it's not mine to tell. He frowned. Then whose? A gunshot cracked through the fog. They both dropped instinctively. The bullet hit the metal railing where her shoulder had been a second earlier. Sparks scattering into the mist. Down Riven hissed. He pulled her behind a shipping crate. Guess they didn't like the invitation, she said. Half breathless, he peered around the corner. A dark figure moved near the docked freighter, the glint of a weapon catching what little light the fog allowed. Who is it? He whispered. One of Vale's partners, she replied. They're cleaning house. How many won tonight? But he's not here to talk. Neither are we. Riven reached under his coat, pulling a small black case, an encrypted recorder, the kind corporate negotiators used for arbitration evidence. Nia blinked. You came prepared. I came curious, he said. Now I'm furious. They moved along the pier, crouching between containers. The fog thickened, swallowing sound and distance. The only rhythm was the sea slapping against the hulls and their breath sinking in time. 2 o'clock. Nia whispered. The shooter stepped into view. Slow and deliberate. Riven recognized him. Carter Morrow. Former Vale associate. One of the men who testified falsely during the board inquiry. Morrow's voice cut through the fog. You think you won? Ashford, you don't even know whose game you're in. Enlighten me. Riven called back. Too late for that. Nia moved before the next shot came. Quick. Clean. Calculated. She kicked a rusted chain loose from a hook above, sending down a cascade of debris that threw Morrow off balance. Riven rushed him, tackling him against a crate. The gun clattered to the ground. Who's paying you? Riven growled, pressing the recorder near his mouth. Morrow spat blood. You think it ends with Vale? He was a puppet. The money. Another shot. Sharper. Closer. Morrow went limp. Blood bloomed across his chest like ink. Nia spun. Gun in hand. Eyes searching the shadows. Nothing. Whoever fired the second shot had already disappeared. Riven stared at the body. He was going to talk. Nia's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Someone made sure he didn't. Someone watching us. She nodded grimly. And now they know we're together again. He looked at her. Then they'll come for us both. She holstered the gun. Let them. I'm tired of hiding. He reached out, stopping her. Nya. Whoever this is. They're bigger than Vale. You can't fight them alone. She looked up at him, eyes dark with defiance. I don't need to win. I just need them exposed. And if it kills you, she smiled faintly, then make sure the story's worth it. Riven Ashford. Sharp. Unflinching. Familiar. The storm hadn't broken them. It had forged them into something dangerous. He took her hand. Then we do it together. Together. She echoed. The sirens were already rising in the distance. Faint at first. Then clearer. Closer. They turned toward the sound. Two silhouettes on the pied. Framed by fog and fury. Ready to face the next shadow the city would throw at them. The truth, after all, had never been a safe thing to chase. By morning, the story of the pier was already circulating through the city's veins. The official version said it was a smuggling dispute turned violent. The unofficial one, the one whispered in polished offices and boardrooms, claimed that Riven Ashford had been seen with the witness again. He stood before the wide glass wall of his office, watching the sunrise bleed over the skyline like an apology that came too late. Below, news drones hovered above police tape, recording nothing and everything at once. Behind him, his security chief spoke carefully. No fingerprints on the weapon, no camera footage from the docks. Whoever that shooter was, they scrubbed it all before we arrived. Riven didn't turn. That means it wasn't random. Sir, this could spiral. You're already being linked to her again. The board wants you to distance yourself. He smiled without warmth. The board can distance themselves all they want. I'm done pretending to be clean in a world built on dirt. The man hesitated, and the woman Riven's reflection in the glass shifted. A faint smile. She's not the problem. She's the compass. When the man left, Riven reached for the recorder in his pocket. The one that had captured Morrow's final words before the bullet cut him short. He plugged it into his laptop. Static hissed. Then a faint voice emerged. You think it ends with Vale? He was a puppet. The money. Gunshot. He rewound it again. Again. Each time. The background static shifted. Something beneath it. A faint echo. Like a radio frequency. Coordinates embedded in the noise. He recognized the pattern, an old corporate encryption format used by the Grey Tower. An investment conglomerate that quietly owned half the city. A name that never appeared in public ledgers but showed up behind almost every scandal that had burned someone else's reputation to the ground. And now it was his turn to light a match. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. The motel room smelled of damp fabric and coffee gone cold. Her laptop screen glowed dimly in the dark. Strings of data streaming like rainfall. Emails. Contracts. Shell company transfers. The trail from Vale's accounts had led here the Grey Tower Group, a corporation that didn't exist on paper, yet held controlling stakes in more than 20 financial entities. It had erased her father's company, funneled his downfall into profit, and silenced everyone who might have spoken. Everyone except her. She rubbed her temples. The names scrolling across the screen blurred together. Subsidiaries. Foundations. False donors. Then one froze her breath. Ashford Holdings. Her fingers tightened around the mouse. The metadata showed dates from before Riven's first company even launched, which meant the money had flowed through him without his knowledge. His empire, his fortune, had been built with their blood. God, she whispered. Her phone buzzed. She flinched, half expecting another threat, another ghost, but it was him. Riven. I think I found where it leads. The Grey Tower. Nia, I'm already there. And you're not going to like what I found. Riven, tell me. Nia, you were part of it. Your company was one of their shells. A long pause. Then Riven. Then I've been building their fortress while thinking I was burning it down. She stared at the message. Heart tightening. For once, she had no words sharp enough to protect either of them. Nia, meet me tonight. The tower's top floor. If we're right, that's where it ends. The gray tower, midnight. The building was an altar to silence. Polished stone. Mirrors for walls. No signage. No lobby music. No cámaras visible. But they were there. Unseen. Watching everything. Riven arrived first. Dressed in black. Every step echoing like a decision he couldn't undo. The security at the entrance didn't stop him. They didn't have to. The tower had ways of letting its prey walk in willingly. The elevator rose without sound. Glass panes revealing the skeletal lights of the city below. When the doors opened at the top floor, Nia was waiting, leaning against a steel column. Hair dam. Laptop bag slung across her shoulder. You came? She said quietly. I built it. He replied. I have to see what I built. The penthouse was empty, save for a long mahogany desk and a panoramic window overlooking the city. On the desk, a single monitor glowed faintly. Nia plugged in a small drive. Her fingers flying over the keyboard, the screen came alive. Ledgers. Offshore accounts. Coded payments. All roads leading to one name, Cassian Ward. Riven froze. He's the chairman of the regulatory board. The one who cleared Vale's acquisitions. Nia nodded. He's not just clearing them. He's orchestrating them. Before he could answer, a voice came from the doorway. Very perceptive. Ems. Deline. Or should I say, the witness Cassian Ward stood there. Immaculate in his gray suit. The calmness of a man who already owned the ending. Two men in dark coats flanked him. I was wondering how long before one of you followed the crumbs, he said, smiling faintly. But I didn't expect both. Riven stepped forward. You killed Morrow. Ward didn't deny it. He was weak. He talked too much. Like your father. Ems. Deline. Nia's jaw clenched. You destroyed him because he wouldn't launder for you. I corrected a liability. Ward said simply. As I'll correct you. Riven's voice dropped. You've built an empire on ruin. Ward chuckled softly. And you've both profited from it. Don't kid yourselves. You live in a system that rewards complicity. You think you're here for justice. You're here because you finally realized you were never innocent. Nia took a step closer. You're right. Ward blinked. I'm not innocent, she said, pulling something from her coat. A sleek black device. That's why I didn't come to expose you. Riven's eyes widened. Yeah? What are you? She pressed the trigger. A pulse wave rippled through the room. Every light flickered. Every monitor shut down. The tower's digital heart flatlined. Ward's smile vanished. What did you do? Nia dropped the device. I erased it. All of it. Your accounts. Your ledgers. Your network. Everything that kept you untouchable. You destroyed the evidence, Riven shouted. No, she said, turning to him. I destroyed their leverage. The guards moved. Riven moved faster. He grabbed Ward, slamming him against the desk. It's over. Ward smiled through the blood on his lip. You think erasing data kills power. Power doesn't live in code. It lives in people like you. Then, from the corridor outside, came the unmistakable sound of boots. Dozens of them. Niamet Riven's gaz. They're coming. He nodded once. Then we finish this our way. She reached into her pocket and tossed him a small flash drive. The one she hadn't wiped. Back door to everything. Get it to the press. What about you? She smiled faintly. I'm the distraction. And before he could stop her, she turned and sprinted into the corridor, straight toward the oncoming storm of men in gray. The last thing he saw was her silhouette against the elevator light. Small. Fierce. Unyielding. And then the gunfire started. The first shot broke the world in half. For a heartbeat, all Riven could hear was static. His pulse? The ringing echo of gunfire. The crash of glass. Then came the screams. He ducked behind the desk as bullets ripped through the polished walls of the gray tower's penthouse. "Nia," he shouted. But the name dissolved into chaos. He grabbed the flash drive she had thrown him. It was still warm. The plastic casing cracked where her fingers had pressed too hard. Then he crawled toward the side exit. Blood pounding in his ears. Ward was gone. The man had vanished the second the shooting started, slipping into the tower's secret elevators like a ghost, returning to its crypt. Typical. Men like him didn't die in crossfire. They waited for the cleanup crew. Riven reached the service stairwell. The emergency lights blinked weakly, turning every shadow into a threat. Down 30 floors. He could hear shouts. The bark of orders. The rush of boots. At the 28th floor. The stairwell door burst open behind him. A figure staggered in. Dark hair. Coat torn. Blood soaking her sleeve. "Nia." She glanced up. Eyes wild but focused. "You didn't leave. I don't run from allies." She grimaced. "Then congratulations. You've learned the stupid part of loyalty." They kept moving. Down. Down. The spiral stairs dizzying. When they hit the maintenance level, Nia stumbled, clutching her arm. "Bullet grazed me," she hissed. "Hold on." He tore off his tie, wrapped it tight around the wound. "You'll live. Did you get it out?" "The drive." "Yeah." "Then go. I'll hold them off." He gripped her shoulders. "You're not dying in a hallway for my sins." She smirked faintly, even as her knees trembled. "It's not your sins I'm paying for." But before either could speak again, the sound of boots grew louder. They were out of time. Riven spotted a ventilation hatch overhead. "Up there." She followed his gaze. "You've got to be kidding. Trust me." He boosted her up first, hands steady despite the gunfire echoing below. Then he climbed after her, pulling the grate shut just as the door burst open. From inside the vent, they watched as armed men swept through the corridor. Faceless. Efficient. Silent. Corporate security. Not police. Nia whispered. "They're not here to arrest us." "No?" Riven said grimly. "They're here to erase us." They crawled through the vents for what felt like hours. The air was metallic. Hot. Suffocating. She could feel her arm throbbing in rhythm with her heartbeat. When they finally dropped out into the underground garage, the night had deepened into something close to apocalyptic. Sirens in the distance. The city skyline pulsing red and blue. Riven found his car hidden under a tarp, black and unmarked. As the engine roared to life, Nia looked back toward the tower. The entire top floor was dark now. She could almost feel it breathing, like a wounded predator, retreating to lick its wounds before striking again. "They'll rewrite everything by morning," she said. "Our names. The footage. The evidence. They'll say we broke in. Maybe that we killed Morrow." Riven tightened his grip on the wheel. "Then we make sure they can't control the story." He drove fast, cutting through the industrial district until the city gave way to the coast. The sea was a mirror, black and endless. Finally, he pulled over near an abandoned lighthouse. "This used to be one of my father's properties," he said quietly. "Off the grid. No cameras. No ice." She looked at him, exhausted. "You trust me here?" He met her gaze. "I don't trust anyone anymore. But I need you alive." She leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes. "You sound like someone who's already written my obituary." He didn't answer. Hours later, the storm came in from the east. Sheets of rain pounding the lighthouse windows. Liam sat at the desk, connecting the flash drive to an old, isolated laptop. The files opened like scars. Images. Transfer records. Audio clips. At the center of it all, the gray tower's beneficiary register. He scrolled. Val. Vos. Dozens of politicians. And then, his own name. Not under employee. Onaes. He felt something hollow out inside him. Nia stirred from the couch. Voice rough. What is it? They owned me. Every contract I ever signed. Every acquisition. I was their puppet. Murize. My downfall. It was all orchestrated. Her eyes softened. You didn't know. It doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't innocence. He turned the laptop toward her. But we have enough here to burn them for good. She looked at the data. Then at him. If we release it, they'll come for us. You'll lose everything again. He laughed bitterly. I already did. For a moment. The storm filled the silence. Then she said, Vedoitadav. Let them wake up to their empire collapsing. He nodded slowly. Together. Just before sunrise, the storm eased. The horizon glowing pale gold. They uploaded the files to every major news outlet, every independent journalist, every social platform with reach. Within minutes, the leak went live. The gray tower exposed. Bank accounts frozen. Arrest warrants issued. Panic spreading like wildfire. Nia watched the first headlines roll in. Her expression wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. Relief. Maybe. Grief. Riven turned to her. We did it. She looked at him. The faintest smile touching her lips. We survived long enough to tell the truth. That's enough. But behind her calm, he saw it. The pallor. The strain. The blood seeping slowly through the makeshift bandage. Nya. He said softly. You're still bleeding. She waved it off. It's nothing. Then she swayed. He caught her before she hit the ground. Stay with me. He whispered, pressing his hand against the wound. Her eyes flickered open. Riven. Promise me something. Anything. When they ask who brought down the gray tower, don't say my name. Nya. Promise. He swallowed hard. I promise. Her eyes softened. Good. Then her body went still. Her head falling against his chest, as the first light of dawn touched her face. Outside. The storm broke into silence. Inside the lighthouse. Riven. The laptop screen still glowing with the words that had cost them everything. Truth uploaded successfully. And for the first time in years, he understood what the truth really was. Not victory. Not justice. Only the courage to tell it. And the price of surviving it. The lighthouse was silent, except for the rhythmic hiss of the ocean against the rocks. He hadn't moved for hours. Nia's body lay on the cot beside him. Paul, still. Wrapped in a white blanket that wasn't white anymore. Morning light spilled across the desk, catching the edge of the laptop. The screen still glowing faintly. The words truth uploaded successfully had long since faded into a news feed now flooded with chaos. The gray tower's collapse had triggered a chain reaction. Stock markets plunged. Resignations poured in, and a dozen executives disappeared. But victory meant nothing when the only person who understood its cost was gone. Riven reached for the jade ring on his finger and turned it slowly. You wanted justice? Yeah. You got it. But what do I do with the ashes then? As if the world refused to let him mourn. The laptop beeped. A new window opened on its own. Encrypted. Unsigned. The message was short. If you're reading this, you're still alive. You don't know me. But Nia did. She left a contingency file for you. Something she didn't trust anyone else to handle. The coordinates are attached. Come alone. The archivist Riven's jaw tightened. He didn't believe in ghosts. But the message had Nia's digital fingerprint, her encryption style, her phrasing the rhythm of someone who had planned too far ahead. She knew she wouldn't make it. He whispered. He stood, looked at her one last time, then closed the blanket around her face like a promise. The coordinates, 4:00 p.m. They led him inland, to a warehouse on the city's forgotten edge. The streets here were bones, cracked, silent, smelling of rust and river water. Inside, the air buzzed with electricity, Screens. Servers. Cables sprawled across the room like the nervous system of some sleeping beast. And in the middle of it all sat a man in a tattered gray coat, white hair, calm eyes. The archivist Riven asked. The man turned. You look taller on the news. Riven ignored the jab. You sent the message. I kept her backup. She knew they'd kill her. Told me to hold the last fragment until you came. What fragment? The archivist gestured to a small black cube on the table. Her fail-safe. The real file she never uploaded. Riven frowned. The leak was everything. The man smiled thinly. No. The leak was the surface. The core stayed offline. She understood that burning a system isn't the same as dismantling it. Riven picked up the cube. It vibrated faintly. Alive with heat. What's inside? Names? Not of the guilty. But of the ones who funded them. Riven froze. The ones above the gray tower, yes. The ones who built it. The archivist leaned forward. And if you release that, you'll start a war. Riven's grip tightened. Then maybe it's time someone did. The man shook his head slowly. Careful. Ashford. The difference between justice and vengeance is just how long you can keep your soul intact. Riven slipped the cube into his pocket. She died believing the truth mattered. I won't make her wrong. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. Don't look for me. Don't save me. Save the proof. I learned something in the end. Riven. The system isn't a monster you kill. It's a mirror. You don't break it by swinging harder. You break it by making people look. Promise me one thing. When you reveal what's in that file, do it in the light, not in anger, not in revenge. In truth. He drove until the night swallowed the horizon. The city glowed behind him like a fever dream. Smaller now, but still watching. He stopped at the same bridge where he'd first met her. The fog was lighter tonight. The river calm. He placed the cube on the railing beside the jade ring. One represented what he'd lost. The other, what remained. He pulled out his phone and opened the press contact list. The same one Nia had used. With one click, the cube's contents could flood every network on the planet. But her voice echoed in his mind, not in anger. In truth, he hesitated. His thumb hovered over the button. Below. The river whispered. Somewhere. A gull cried. A sound both mournful and free. Finally, he smiled. Faintly. Painfully. All right. Yeah. The light it is. He pressed send. The cube pulsed once, then dissolved in a streak of blue fire, data scattering into the cloud like ashes carried by wind. He watched until the light faded. Then he turned away from the bridge. Hands empty for the first time. Behind him, dawn was beginning again. Soft. Fragile. And uncorrupted. The city didn't explode when the truth hit. It shifted. Like tectonic plates grinding beneath glass towers. Every institution, every corporation, every name connected to the gray tower began to fracture. By sunrise, reporters were calling it the second fall. Markets froze. Parliament suspended trading. The streets filled not with protests, but silence. The kind that comes when a population realizes the lie ran deeper than their outrage. And through it all, Riven Ashford became a symbol again. Only this time, he didn't want to be one. He moved through the day like a ghost watching screens, turning down interviews, burning every bridge the world tried to rebuild for him. He had kept his promise to Nia. Released the truth not for revenge, but for light. And yet the light felt cold. At dusk. He found himself back at the harbor, standing beside the lighthouse that had become her grave. The waves moved slower tonight. The sea calmer. As if exhausted by everything it had witnessed. He knelt, brushing his fingers across the wet stones. You said people only change when they're forced to look, he whispered. I made them look. Now I just have to hope they don't blink. Behind him, footsteps crunched against gravel. He turned. It was the archivist. You made quite a mess. The old man said, Half the city wants to canonize you. The other half wants to erase you. Riven smirked faintly. Then maybe I finally did something right. The man approached, holding a folded piece of paper. You didn't just release a story, Ashford. You set off a reckoning. The names in that file weren't just corporate. They were political, international. People are disappearing. But one name didn't show up. Riven frowned. Whose? The archivist's eyes gleamed. Yours. He unfolded the paper. It was a registry document, dated the night before the upload. Under founding entities, the Grey Tower conglomerate. A single alias had been added in small print: R. Ashford Trust. Rivens Pulstura? That's impossible. Ward covered his tracks well. The man said, before the tower fell. He tied your identity to the network, on paper. You're the last surviving director of the system you destroyed. Riven exhaled slowly, bitter laughter breaking through. So the monster lives through me. The archivist's gaze softened. You could run, start over, but if you stay, they'll hunt you. The new regime always needs someone to blame for the sins of the last. He thought of Nia. Her voice, her defiance, her belief that truth meant facing the mirror no matter what it showed. I won't run, he said finally. Not again. The old man studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then you'd better be ready for what comes next. He handed Riven a small envelope. She left this too. Riven's hand trembled as he opened it. Inside, a photograph, taken years before the chaos. Nya, smiling faintly beside her father, sunlight flaring behind them. On the back, in her handwriting, if the truth ever turns on you, remember, it chose you for a reason. Nia posthumous broadcast that night. The networks interrupted regular programming with a new video. Anonymous source. No traceable origin. The screen flickered, then showed Nia's face. Not the haunted version Riven remembered, but calm, steady, alive in memory. If you're watching this, it means the world has finally heard what it didn't want to. But don't mistake exposure for healing. You can't fix corruption by removing names. You fix it by remembering how you forgot. The system will always find another name, another scapegoat, another Riven Ashford. So the question isn't whether the truth survives, it's whether you do. Her image faded, leaving behind the sound of wind over water. He watched the broadcast from the docks, waves breaking against the pylons. For the first time, he didn't feel haunted, just accountable. He turned the photograph over in his hand, the ink already smudging from rain. All right. Nya, he murmured. If I'm the scapegoat, I'll make it count. Behind him, sirens began to wail again. Closer this time. They weren't for him yet, but they would be soon. He looked once more at the horizon, where night met the endless sea. The city's reflection trembled there, a shimmering illusion of power waiting to be rebuilt. He straightened his coat, slipped the photo into his pocket, and started walking toward the sound. Because some truths didn't need escape. They needed witnesses willing to stay. And if he had to become one of those, so be it. The summons came at dawn. A convoy of black vehicles outside his apartment. Silent men in gray suits. No badges, but no hesitation either. They didn't handcuff him. It wasn't that kind of arrest. This was theater. The state needed an audience for its absolution. Inside the car, rain ran down the tinted glass like a curtain. He couldn't pull back. The driver said nothing. The escort nothing. The city blurred past in monochrome. They brought him not to a court, but to a hearing room in the National Financial Tribunal. An amphitheater of glass and steel. Cameras lined the walls. Rows of journalists filled the balcony, lenses glinting like predatory eyes. And at the center, a long table. 3 judges in black robes. The middle one, Justice Marin Holt, watched him with the kind of calm that only power can afford. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of pre-written history. Riven Ashford, Former CEO of Ashford Technologies. Former consultant to Vale Enterprises. Former patriot of progress. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Sharp. Cruel. She continued. You stand accused of complicity in the construction and concealment of the financial network known as the Grey Tower. Though your actions later exposed the system, the record shows your name as one of its founding trustees. How do you plead? Riven looked up. His reflection stared back at him from the glass wall behind them. Half shadow. Half memory. I plead guilty, he said. The gallery erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. The fever of headlines being born. Holt frowned. To what charge? To all of them, he said softly. Guilty of ignorance. Of ambition. Of looking away until the fire reached my own doorstep. She leaned forward. Mr. Ashford. This isn't a confessional. It's a tribunal. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it should have been a confessional years ago. The gavel struck once. Sharp. Order. The broadcast. Across the nation. Screens lit up with the feed. The Ashford hearing became the most watched event since the scandal broke. In cafes. Hospitals. Universities. Everywhere. People stopped to listen, not to the judges. To him. When the prosecutor laid out the evidence. Financial records. Falsified documents. Photos of him shaking hands with Ward. Riven didn't deny it. He explained it. How the system rewarded silence. How success was built on ignorance disguised as efficiency. How people like him learned to call complicity strategy. You profited. The prosecutor said. Yes. Riven replied. And so did you. The room froze. I didn't sell weapons or trade secrets. He continued. I sold trust. The most valuable currency in the world. And like every man who does, I believed I was doing it for progress. Until someone reminded me that progress without conscience is just a more elegant form of decay, just as Holt stared at him. Someone. He hesitated. Then said quietly. Her name was Nia Delane. The chamber fell silent again. Nia archive recording. Exhibit 47B. The defense requested her final message. The one recovered from the wreckage of her encrypted drives. Her face appeared again. Ghost-like on the courtroom's massive screen. If he's standing there, let him speak. Don't mistake guilt for corruption. Sometimes the only way to dismantle a monster is to admit you were once one of its hands. Even Holt looked shaken. The proceedings lasted 3 days. They called witnesses. Former board members. Analysts. Even journalists who had made careers dissecting his fall. Each one tried to paint him as the architect of everything that went wrong. He didn't defend himself. He only corrected them. I wasn't the architect, he said on the final day. Just the scaffolding. The tower built itself. People like me held it up. When Holt asked for his closing statement, he stood and faced the cameras directly. Every empire falls the same way, he said. Not from enemies. From accountants. From lawyers. From those who say, it's not my responsibility. If you want a villain, make it me. I've learned how to stand in that light. But if you want to stop this from happening again, then turn the camera on yourselves. The room held its breath. Verdict day. They found him partially culpable. A phrase that meant everything and nothing. He wouldn't go to prison. The court called it symbolic restitution. His assets were seized. His name blacklisted. His companies nationalized. When it ended, the press swarmed the steps of the tribunal. Mr. Ashford, do you regret what you did? He paused. Rain pooling at his feet. Microphones thrust like knives toward his mouth. I regret how long it took me to stop. Do you think the truth was worth it? Another shouted. He looked straight into the camera lens. She did. And he walked away. Later that night, he returned to the bridge again. The one where every chapter seemed to start and end. The fog had lifted. The city lights glimmered. Distorted, but beautiful. He placed the photograph of Nia and her father on the railing beside the jade ring. The wind caught its corner, fluttering it like a heartbeat. Then he spoke softly into the darkness. You were right. Nia, the mirror doesn't break from anger. It breaks when people finally dare to look. Behind him, the sirens of the city faded into quiet. Ahead, the river reflected the skyline. Broken. Yes. But shimmering. And for the first time, Riven didn't see a prison in that reflection. He saw a beginning. 6 months after the tribunal, the city learned how to breathe again, not in peace. Cities like this never find peace, but in something close to awareness. The old towers of the gray network were gone. What replaced them were new agencies, public trusts, transparency boards. Different names, same bones. And Riven Ashford was officially a ghost. His name no longer appeared in any registry. His accounts were emptied. His penthouse sold. His face blurred out of search engines under de-indexing orders. He had been erased in the way the powerful erase inconvenient memories. Cleanly. Legally. With signatures instead of bullets. But he was still here. He lived now above an old repair shop by the harbor. No staff. No cameras. Just salt air. Rostelmädel. And the slow work of forgetting. He fixed radios. Old watches. Discarded things that once told people when and where they were. He liked that. Every repair felt like rewriting a small lie about time. Some nights, he still dreamed of the tribunal lights. Some nights, of Nia standing on the bridge, her eyes full of unspent defiance. He always woke before she spoke. The world didn't heal. It adapted. The gray tower's collapse had left a vacuum, and vacuums, like guilt, never stay empty. New corporations emerged, draped in ethics, bathed in reform. Journalists called it the era of reflection, but reflection, Riven knew, was just vanity turned inward. Still, something had changed. People questioned now. The blind confidence was gone. That was Nia's legacy, and maybe his punishment to live long enough to see the world half awake, blinking, almost aware, but never fully redeemed. One afternoon, as gulls screamed over the pier, a knock came at his door. Riven wiped his hands on a rag and opened it. A young woman stood there. Early 20s. Serious eyes. The kind of calm that came from inherited purpose. She wore a press badge clipped to her coat. Lucienne Delane. The Vanguard Post. He froze. Your name? She nodded. My mother was Nia. For a moment, the room tilted. That's impossible, he whispered. She recorded letters before the final upload. My father kept them until he passed. I've been piecing them together. He stared, searching her face. The resemblance was there. The line of the jaw. The quiet intelligence behind her stillness. What do you want from me? He asked. The truth, she said simply. The part that never made it to the light. He hesitated. There's nothing left to tell. There's always something left, she said. You both burned down an empire. But I grew up hearing about the cost. I need to understand what it gave you. He looked at her. Then at the sea beyond the window. It gave us clarity, he said finally. And clarity hurts more than lies. She didn't flinch. Then tell me anyway. They sat by the window as the sun sank into the harbor. The air smelled of oil and rain. Lucienne placed a small recorder on the table. Start wherever you want, she said. Riven exhaled slowly. Then I'll start with her. And he did. He told her everything. The night at the conservatory. The pier. The tower. The trial. Not as a confession, but as an inheritance. His voice trembled when he reached the end. She wasn't trying to destroy power, he said. She was trying to remind it what it had forgotten. Its reflection. She thought truth could make the world look in the mirror. Lucienne's eyes glistened. And you? He smiled faintly. I learned that the mirror breaks. But the light doesn't. They sat in silence. The recorder's red light blinked. Patient. Steady. Alive. After a while, she asked, "Do you regret saving the file?" That last one, he considered. No. Because if I hadn't, you wouldn't be here. She looked down. Voice soft. She said you'd say that. He frowned. Lucienne pulled a folded paper from her coat. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Nias, if he's still alive, tell him this. Don't wait for forgiveness. Just keep telling the truth until it stops hurting. Riven closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't fight the tears. When he opened them, the sky outside had turned to gold. The tide rolled in. The horizon shimmered like a wound learning to scar. He reached over, gently turned off the recorder. That's enough for today. Lucienne nodded. Will I see you again? Maybe, he said. If you still think the truth is worth chasing. She smiled. Nia's smile. It always is. When she left, Riven stood at the window for a long time. Watching her fade into the city that had once swallowed them both, he felt the faintest warmth through the glass. The sunset. Or maybe something else. Either way, he didn't look away. He opened the drawer beside his bed. The jade ring lay there. Its crack now dulled with time. He picked it up, turned it in the light, then placed it back gently. For years, he had worn it as a reminder of loss. Tonight, it felt more like proof of survival. He whispered into the quiet room. You were right. Nya. The light stayed. Outside, the harbor lights flickered on. One be one. Small, stubborn stars reclaiming the dark. And for the first time, the city didn't look like a wound. It looked like something healing. The story went live at 6:00 a.m. Sharp. Her editor had called it the Mirror Doctrine, the final testimony of Riven Ashford. Within an hour, it was on every network. Mirrored. Dissected. Debated. Some called it redemption, others manipulation, but it didn't matter. The truth was out. Again, Lucienne watched from her small apartment, eyes reflecting the glow of the screen. Every word of his voice. Steady. Haunted. Unfiltered. Played back like the echo of a generation's guilt. We don't heal by forgetting corruption. We heal by remembering who we were when we allowed it. The anchor's voice followed. Smooth and solemn. Ashford disappeared 3 days after the interview. No trace. No farewell. Only this message. Scheduled to post at dawn. Lucienne turned off the television. She didn't need the rest. She already knew where he'd gone. The boat engine hummed beneath him. Steady as a heartbeat. The ocean stretched out infinite, swallowing the skyline behind him. The city was shrinking, a reflection fading in the tide. He had left everything behind the workshop. The letters, even the ring. Only the old recorder remained, its red light flickering as if alive. He pressed the button. To whoever finds this, if you're listening, it means the noise has quieted. The truth doesn't vanish. It just waits for those who can bear to carry it. I once thought justice was about punishing the powerful, but I've learned it's about making sure we never forget why they became powerful in the first place. The world doesn't need another hero. It needs memory. And if I disappear, let that be my way of giving the noise back to silence. He stopped the recording. The wind tore at his coat. Cool and salt-sweet. Somewhere beyond the fog, the lighthouse still stood, its faint beam sweeping across the dark water. He closed his eyes, letting it pass over him one last time. Then, gently, he tossed the recorder into the sea. A week later, she stood on the same bridge where everything began. The air smelled of rain and engine smoke. She had brought nothing but a notebook and Nia's letter. When the tide receded, something glinted among the rocks. A cracked recorder. Sea-stained but intact. She picked it up. Pressed play. Riven's voice drifted out. Soft but clear. As though the sea itself had carried it back. Don't wait for forgiveness. Keep telling the truth until it stops hurting. Lucienne smiled through her tears. You really didn't know how to stop. Did you? She looked out at the horizon, where dawn was breaking, a pale gold bleeding into the endless blue, the same light her mother had chased, the same light Riven had refused to turn away from. She opened her notebook and began to write. The light stayed, and so did we. Years later, and in classrooms and history journals, they would teach the Grey Tower scandal as the event that reshaped an era. Students would learn about corruption, courage, and the price of revelation, but what they wouldn't find in any archive was how it really ended. Not with a verdict, not with a body, but with a transmission carried by tide, a daughter listening to two ghosts, and a city slowly remembering how to look at itself. As the lighthouse turned one last time toward the sea, its beam caught the water like a breath held too long. Then